Thank you. This evening we're going to talk about making software development hum. There's probably no one in this room who hasn't had some experience of going down the road and experiencing the speed bumps or the or had the experience of when development is stalled, or had the experience of running headlong into roadblocks. And but given it for any one of you, given a few diagnostics and a few tools, you can help to both diagnose your organizations, diagnose when you've got problems, and what to do about them. I keep getting brought into organizations where software development's not moving very well, where I need to untangle the knots in software development, where I can help to make software development hum, to tune up the engine and make it actually run well. And it turns out that I'm actually fairly good at that over the number of years. And I've also repeatedly found that making small tweaks can make a big difference in making software development run really well. So a decade ago, my co-author and I realized that maybe our experience as software development managers and as directors of engineering and as more recently VPs of engineering and CTOs that we had been sharing with each other had value maybe not just with each other, but with in fact many of the people who are trying to make software development hum, who are trying to make their own software development work better. And so the first thing we did was to gather 300 rules of thumb that we had been sharing with each other over breakfasts over a course of a decade. And then we spent the next 8 years writing 9 chapters around it from our own experience of how to make software development run better. My experience, having landed in one organization after another, is that almost everybody's experiencing some chaos in software development. So, what's your experience? Who's seen chaos in a product group? Yeah, okay. Who hasn't? So that was part of my question. So, do you have chaos in your current group? Yeah, only a few people are willing to admit to that right now, but I bet there are more than that. Who feels like their development is running rough? Yeah, there are similar hands going up. And who's suffering from organizational knots? Yep. And is anyone's development organization running so smoothly it doesn't need tuning? Oh, close. Okay, we've got one. Anybody else? All right, take note. This fellow over here may have some answers for us too, and that's a good thing. One of the things that I want to encourage you to do is think about what would success look like. One of the things that's really valuable for us to do, whether we're managers or whether we're individual contributors, is think about what would make it look great. So how many of you are insanely proud of the quality of the software you deliver into production? Okay, I got a couple of hands. How many of you want to be insanely proud of the quality of the software development, the software you deliver into production? Okay, there's a bunch more hands. All right, so that's sort of the thinking that you want to do. Think about what are you trying to accomplish. Think about what that organization feels like. How many of you have been in an organization that was truly high performance? Yeah, so what were the characteristics of that?
Small team.
Small team.
Ignored the management structure.
Ignored the management structure. Great. What else?
High collaboration.
What?
High collaboration.
High collaboration. Same thing, high collaboration.
So key decisions were done by maximum 2 or 3 people in the group. The rest were just following what their vision was.
Okay.
Well-defined requirements.
Well-defined requirements. We're going to get to that. That's great. Yes. Isn't that amazing when we, isn't
Constantly evolving, but well-defined.
constantly evolving? Yes, 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 which is sort of true of our space, yes.
And a way to measure those requirements at all points of the project is most important.
A way to measure them in what way?
Just metrics on that accomplishment.
So,
We got a PRD, let's say, of 300 items. You know, last week we did 50 of them, that sort of thing.
so we can see our progress. Is that part of it?
Right.
And you have a sales team that can sell your software.
You have a sales team that can sell your software. Okay, so that's probably not part of being a high performance team, but it probably is a high characteristic of satisfaction.
Then it drives the development team to work.
And it drives the development team because you know your software is going to get out there. There's nothing worse than developing software and not seeing it in the hands of users.
With part of those specifications also having unit tests, and that can quantify very well that things are done, and it's also fighting up front for QA.
So we've got a way of knowing that we're done. That's a highly satisfactory way of knowing that we've got quality in our software as well. Clarity in what the metrics are.
An achievable schedule.
An achievable schedule, yes.
And related to that, dealing with problems instantly, like right then.
Dealing with problems, so probably removing impediments right then, right?
Changing your damn requirements and your goals right then.
So say more.
Recognizing what the current problems are, because you've got metrics, and getting the appropriate people, hopefully the whole team, to decide how to deal with that, even if that means changing your requirements, which can include your schedule.
Okay, so you're a learning organization and you're constantly iterating not just your product, but your organization.
Deal with reality now.
Deal with reality now. Was there another hand? Back here.
So explaining the bigger picture to the entire group, and then the individual contributors explaining what is their role to accomplish the bigger picture.
Yeah, feeling like we're all part of the company's mission, part of the product's mission, part of the vision, part of the roadmap, and understanding what our part in that is. Yeah, it's really significant, isn't it? Yeah, that's really huge. Yes.
Going into that, like cohesively knowing where your roles overlap.
Cohesively knowing where all of your roles on the team overlap. And what's the most important part of that for you?
Role.
What?
Role.
Your role.
You understand what the role is and your responsibility in the team.
So you're a piece of it. You really understand where you fit.
Just me, everyone in the team, that's successful.
Right. So everyone understands where they fit. Yeah. That's huge. So I want to note here that it's really important when we think about what defines success for our teams that we think not just about what's wrong. We have a tendency to look for what's wrong, but also look for what's right. It's hugely important to think about what's going right on our teams, because those are things we want to make sure we repeat, that we keep doing. And then we can also look for what's wrong. So if we look for the issues and the symptoms, then some of the things we might want to look at is turnover on our teams. That's a symptom. We might want to look at, do we feel like we're part of a high performance team? Do we feel like we're really delivering on productivity and throughput on our team? Do we, how about the handoffs between developers and QA, between product managers and developers, so we've got all of these different parts of our organization. What are the handoffs like? We can look at process glitches and at the bottlenecks. The whole notion of Kanban and of Lean is looking for what holds up our development. Where are the bottlenecks? And then how can we smooth those out? And those of you who've done this know that the second you smooth out a bottleneck, you find another bottleneck underneath. So you're always looking for the next bottleneck that you can smooth out. But every time you do that, your whole throughput speeds up. So looking at quality, that question I asked you earlier, are we insanely proud of the quality we're delivering to production? Single points of failure. So do we have silos of knowledge on our team? Are we sharing that? Are we cross-pollinating knowledge and cross-training people across all of our teams.
Sometimes I would motivate people on my team by calling it vacation insurance. You cross-train somebody else, and then you're not so critical you can't go on vacation.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And I'm seeing heads nodding, knowing that there are some people who can't go on vacation on your teams, or for whom it's really a dangerous thing. So communication breakdown. So it's sort of in the handoffs kind of area, right? But communication breakdowns, where do those occur? Does your sales team ever sell stuff you can't make? Never happens, right? Right. Are we rewarding heroes, or are we rewarding teamwork? Really important. Really important. Software is fundamentally a team sport. Most companies are run by former salespeople, which is a hero's sport. But most software development is a team sport, and we need to reward teamwork. And sources of disruption and interruption and the kind of impediments that get in our way. So all of these are things that we can look at that can help us to figure out what are the things that we need to influence to fix. So I need to say, no one can fix everything. I've been a VP of engineering, I've been a CTO, I've been a director of engineering, I've been an individual contributor. At none of those levels could I ever have fixed everything. And for the fact, the one about sales selling stuff that we can't build is one of those that in development, mostly we can't fix that, but we can influence it and we can try to influence it. But I want to note about this. I said that managing the unmanageable, we collected 300 rules of thumb in the center section of our book. And one of them that I particularly like, so I grew up on a farm in Iowa, and there's a rule of thumb that dates from Ben Franklin's time that says, life is simpler when you plow around the stump. And sometimes there are parts of our organizations that are just so stuck that it's a lot easier to plow around them and to figure out how to work around them. And some of those things we just can't fix. I also want to note that despite the name of this talk, which is Transforming Chaos to Clarity, not all chaos is bad. What kinds of chaos are positive, in fact? Brainstorming, yes, brainstorming, that's one.
Parallel efforts when you're not sure what the best solution is, as long as you bound it.
Okay, parallel efforts. Doing what we call spikes in Agile, or where we're just literally exploring how to solve a problem that we have no idea how to get to, thinking outside the box.
So early crosstalk between the dev and QA, though it looks like chaos, each of one of them is able to figure out what the end feature is.
Yes. The communication can look very chaotic sometimes, and communication's almost always good. Right here. Prototyping can look pretty chaotic sometimes, and it can really deliver some good stuff. So chaos isn't all bad. So we don't want to eliminate the useful chaos. We're just looking for the misfires. We're just looking for the pings in our software development engine. So in the course of doing a lot of, so the last 3 years I've been consulting. I've been an interim VP of engineering. I've been an acting CTO. I've come in and done assessments of organizations, and I've trained organizations to do Agile, and I've trained managers to manage more effectively. And the impediments that I've found are almost always unique in every organization, but they have patterns, and they tend to fall into 5 categories. Categories of process, culture, communication, planning, and rigor. And so I'm going to talk about some specific things that to look for and to think about as we go along. And the first one of those was one that you called out, one of you called out, which is requirements. Requirements is probably, well, who remembers what GIGO means? Garbage in, garbage out, right? I mean, if we get bad requirements, we're going to get bad results. That's the fundamental element of that. How many of you who are programmers have ever gotten a totally unambiguous set of requirements? Is that a hand? One? One? More than once? Ooh, more than once. That's really good. In my entire career, I've only ever seen one. So that's really good that you're getting more than that. And back here?
Actually, it's translating from a different language, so.
Okay, all right. Any product managers in the room? All right, so we've got a product manager here. So have you ever created a set of specs and not gotten back what you expected? Yeah. Yeah, right. So one of the challenges here is that we've got product managers and we've got developers, and they don't necessarily speak the same language. So a lot of product managers have gone to business school. Did you go to business school? No. But a lot of product managers have gone to business school. I think they go to different bars than I go to. And they go to those bars on Sunday nights, and they talk about requirements, and they all understand each other's requirements, and then we all go to bars, and none of us understand those requirements. It's like two different, right? A good interface for some of us who are programmers is like a REST API or a Linux pipe. And what product managers are talking about, well, a good interface for users. Those are not exactly the same thing. So we've got two different languages that we need to talk, and you know, Jeffrey Moore talks about crossing the chasm, and so I'll have to ask his apology for this, but I think the chasm in software development is the one that requirements come over. It's the challenge of getting the requirements across and fully well communicated from product managers to developers. And the solution, and I'm jumping ahead of myself, I know. So let's see what else I'm trying to say here before I do that. Basically said all that. Are they ever complete? Anybody ever had a complete set of requirements? So we've got one complete set of requirements back here. Yes?
There's a lot of new validation tools and stuff for, you know, safety concerns and certifications. How does that fit into, you know, specs? Because those are trying to be more complete and be able to almost.
Well, they're trying to make sure our code is complete. But the first thing we want to do is we want to delight users. And requirements are coming from users. They're coming from customers. They're coming from out there, and we're trying to understand how to, for sure, deliver what it is that our customers, our users, are you know, we want to delight users fundamentally. Does that answer your question?
Well, there may be cases like for a car or a medical treatment that you don't want to kill someone. So that's a general specification or requirement, but the details are important. So.
Right. So there's some requirements that run across things. John?
So I just wanted to point out you did a semantic shift in your talk. And that is, we used to talk about customer satisfaction, which means enough done basically for now. And now you're saying customer delight. And that's a change. We're 70 years into the computer revolution. And they didn't talk about customer delight in the 50s.
But I think Steve Jobs did. He was very good at delighting customers. So solutions, I'm going to suggest that there are two fundamental solutions for requirements. There are two things we need to work on to get across the chasm, to get requirements fully understood by developers. And one of them is communication, and one of them is team building. So I'm also a co-author of the study of product team performance, and have been for the last couple of years, and we're currently working on the 2015 study. The 2014 study, we asked the question, how would you rate your product team's cross-functional collaboration, trust, and communication? The good news is that 10% of respondents said their product teams function as a seamless team. The bad news is that 90% of product teams didn't. I was at Schwab almost 20 years ago, actually. We were doing new development in Java. We were doing 1996. Java was darn new. We were pushing boundaries. We were inventing stuff. We were trying to do stuff that nobody had ever done with Java before, or close. We were in parallel with a bunch of other people who were trying to do that same thing. And our management took all of us, the developers, the QA people, the product managers, the networking people, the server engineers, took all of us off-site. We did organizational development kind of stuff for an afternoon every month for the course of about 4 months until we shipped our first product. And the value of that, the value of the collaboration we got out of that, the value of the communication we got out of that, the teamwork we got out of that. Now, you know, those of us who are individual contributors don't get to do that, and those of us who were directors of engineering didn't get to do it again. I came back thinking, you know, I never want to work on a team that doesn't do this, that doesn't do that kind of team building stuff once a month because of the value, the hype. That ended up being a very high performance team. And I've never been on a team that did that since. As crazy as that seems. But that's really important.
But you're calling number 2 there a negative thing. I would think that occasionally you want to have issues. Otherwise you just get groupthink. And you're just going down the wrong path.
Yeah, I think we're talking about a different kind of issue. So we definitely want to be communicating with each other, and we want to be communicating at a high level and have collaboration, trust, and communication with each other, as opposed to facing these issues.
So what specific team building exercises or behaviors that you do at these offsites?
You got to get a bunch of OD people to. This has been 15 years for me. It's the OD being organizational development. You know, those people know how. You know, I'm a nerd. My people's skills are not high enough to guide that. But it was both work stuff and non-work stuff, and it was working together around identifying what our values were relative to the product, understanding our mission, understanding all of us, the whole room's participation in that mission and how we were going to accomplish it together, and it was huge. It was really valuable. Back here, Bill.
So in terms of exercises, examples of exercises like that, I was working for a large English company that got a bunch of us together in Dallas to do some of these kinds of exercises. One of the things they did was to try to get us to understand about handing off things and how important that could be. So one of the exercises was to have everybody in a circle, and you had a basket of balls, and you would try to pass the ball around the circle as fast as possible, then introduce another one, then introduce another one. And keep that up until you couldn't, the circle couldn't handle any more balls. And I'm not talking about handing it next to the person next to you. I'm talking about throwing it across the circle, this kind of thing. But the point was to try to get people to understand that if you coordinate with other people, you can actually accomplish more.
What was the increase from the beginning of the exercise to the end of the exercise? Seeing this done, what was the increase? With planning, with thinking about it, with how much better did you get?
I'm not sure that we measured that exactly, but we certainly got up to a certain large number of balls. And I think they did, I don't remember all the details, but I think they did make a change partway through to, oh yes, they pointed out that you had to keep your attention on the person that you are going to receive from. And if you did that, then we were able to get more balls in motion.
Yeah, so I've actually run that exercise, but I've been in it multiple times too, and you end up being able to pass more balls back and forth than by maybe even an order of magnitude more than you thought you were going to be able to do when you started off doing it. It's just remarkable how much planning and teamwork and collaboration makes a difference.
Yeah, so there are, if you get an effective class like that, and I guess they're not all effective, but if you get an effective class like that, then there are some interesting exercises that make you think about kind of the meta view of your work.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So fundamentally, all of us can work on building trust relationships on our teams. I mean, it starts with us, right? Wherever we are, whatever our role is, it starts with us, and it starts with figuring that out, and one of the biggies is product management and engineering collaboration, but it's also engineering and QA collaboration, and it's collaboration, and we tend to group in our roles, but if we can figure out how to collaborate and build trust relationships across that, it's incredibly valuable. To establish processes for our partners to fit into that make sense and that are high communication kinds of processes, and just increase the communication is huge. You were going to ask a question?
Yes. My question was the earlier survey, if you had asked the product management, their response would be, we are doing pretty good and that we have got good communication. And you ask the same thing in the engineering side, they would be the 90% which says that there's complete cure. And so what I'm saying is the product management always thinks all the requirements are enough and you guys are not doing your job. When you ask the engineering the other way around, when you look from the other side of the scope, they say that these guys are not giving us the right requirements.
Yeah. I was doing some work with Ash's in the back row. I was doing some work with his team, and I believe it was your team that did this. And we got about halfway through, and we were doing a lot of work in Agile and learning to use Agile and using Agile effectively. And we got about halfway through the day, and I had a developer say, wow, the product manager's job is hard. And I had a product manager say, wow, developers have got a lot of work to do that's not just my stories. There's a lot of technical debt in this product, and that getting everybody to understand each other's roles and challenges is huge. And you're absolutely right. Yes?
I traditionally get everybody to collaborate in creating the requirements, so it's not a matter of product management saying, here are the requirements, do you have any comments, do you understand them? We actually get everybody down to the dweebiest programmer involved in helping to put them together. It doesn't mean everybody gets the same vote, but they all collaborate in doing it from the get-go.
And understanding what the issues and the stories are, and yeah, it's huge.
So do you see the opposite, where the product manager is an engineer in the past and wants to step in on everything? How do you see that case?
So I think it depends on it depends entirely on the product, and there are some very highly technical products where engineers are appropriate as product managers. There are three major organizations in the United States that teach product management. So I briefly was a product manager when I went to Apple. I've managed product managers, but I'm fundamentally an engineer. One of the three organizations that teaches product management puts out a placemat of all of the skill sets required for product management. There's no human being I've ever met that has all of the skill sets for product management. You can sort of I class product managers into three groups. One of them is product owners. Those are the product managers I, as a developer, want. So I want a product manager who's always available to me and is always ready to talk to me, and who is never leaves the room, and who I can disambiguate requirements with on a moment's notice. But there are also but we also need product managers who are out talking to customers all the time. And they can't be in the room all the time if they're on planes to New York and to Delhi and to London and to Paris. So we need multiple kinds of product managers. And a lot of the characteristics of really good product managers have a lot to do with people skills, which doesn't tend to be one of our skills as engineers. At least, you know, it's was not naturally one of mine. It's one I've had to work on growing, and I'm still way behind on it.
Just to respond to the question in the past, I've been in a consulting role and then went into product management. And as a product manager, part of my specs were just on what to do, but also how to, which is sometimes crossing the product manager boundary. But the developers knew database and Java, this was all data mining algorithm heavy. So
very technical product
in a narrow area.
In a very narrow area.
And then I would deliver, here's an example working system and our prototype.
Yep.
Developing prototypes and saying, gee, a mere marketing guy can develop this prototype. Really easy to propose.
All right, so I'm going to step back from what is a product manager and what's a developer and go to the, regardless of who they are, we need to talk better to each other. We need to do a lot more communication with each other. We need to do a lot more collaboration with each other, regardless of what those roles are.
An example, but in a different context. So we had a product manager who started his career as an engineer, then became a second level manager and director of the development organization, and then he transitioned into product management. So what he would do is in the requirements, after the requirements, he would write 3 or 4 lines where he would see the different products, his view of how they would integrate. And that requirement was always complete because he saw it the other way around. If I were to take this product, how would I implement it? His requirements were always, we would never go and question him back. I mean, we would never go and ask him. But the rest of the product required guys had no clue as to how underneath it was supposed to be implemented. And that was the big difference that I saw between these two PRDs.
Yeah, my shift into product management was for development tools at Apple.
I don't know how you feel about pair programming, but is there an equivalent thing, which is an interdepartmental type?
Yeah, well, so the Agile solution is, the canonical Agile solution is, put everyone in a room where they can, where if they look up, there's a product manager they can see. So what happens for those of us who are software developers when we run into an ambiguity in the requirements? What do?
It's 3 in the morning and you make something up because your product manager isn't awake and they're going to be really pissed when you call them.
Yes.
And then the next day they're really pissed, or actually
Because you made something up.
Really pissed because you made something up, and they weren't paying attention, so they didn't find out for 3 months, even though you tried to tell them.
Right. So constant availability of product managers is the Agile answer. So I want to keep going here. And I want to keep going through two more of these, which is we want to never succumb to the them versus us. It's not, it's all us. Everybody on our teams is us. If we can get to us for our whole team, it's a start toward reaching that high performance team, and avoiding the blame game is key to that. And then there's the Agile solution, which sort of embodies a whole bunch of those things. It says that teamwork is inordinately important and that we need to all work together and we need to be co-located with each other and we need to focus on team interaction and we need to interact as a team every day and we need a single product owner, not multiple people yanking developers' change, but a single product owner who can bring requirements and who will bring just enough requirements, not 400, who's gotten 400 pages of specs ever?
I've written them.
Yeah. So not having the delay of writing 400 pages of specs, because that takes months to write before we can even start coding. And 2, making sure that nobody can understand 400 pages of requirements on the developer side. So what's that?
H.264, 312 pages.
Yeah, it's huge. So, and then we also want them prioritized by business value so that as developers, we always know we're working on the most important thing for our customers. And we get details just in time. So the product managers don't have to write 400 pages. All they have to write is, what are all the names of the features, and give me the next 3 sprints worth of features in detail, because those are the 3 sprints worth of features that are the most important thing for our customers. And if we get those, by the time we get those done, they'll have the next 3 sprints worth of details on those. And then we keep requirements very stable during our sprints so that developers can focus. But the requirements can totally change on sprint boundaries. We can take a total change in direction, and that's the value of Agile. So there are only two challenges with Agile. The first is doing Agile, and the second is being Agile. So one of you, actually Ash, this partly came from you, the question was, so what do I look for when I'm looking at Agile, at doing Agile, and at being Agile? And the first thing that I look for is we need, before we start coding, we need to have a common definition of done. And it's not a common definition of done that management hands us, because we get a sheet of paper like that and we put it into a notebook and we never look at it again. This is a common definition of done that the whole team has a conversation around. So the question about what does organizational development look like? What does team building look like? That's one of those things that if we all participate in, so if we don't have a common definition of done, what might a programmer's definition of done be?
Amount of time.
Amount of time. It compiles.
My test run.
What was that? My
test run.
My test run.
Once.
My test ran once.
Works on my system.
Works on my system. Works in my sandbox. Works on my server. Works against the browser that I tested it in, the one I run on my machine.
You can't prove that I'm not done.
You can't prove that I'm not done. Right? So, right. If we don't have a common definition of done, how can we prove that John's not done? Exactly. That's so true.
Notary engineering.
Okay. So the first thing that I have over time become more and more convinced that this is the most important practice in Agile. And I'll say at this point that it's probably the most important practice in software development. It's just that Agile collects best practices. Agile is in many ways a collection of best practices that all work together, that all are synchronized with each other, sort of back here.
Yeah, I want to add on the done, so there's a big distance between done and done.
Big distance between done and done. Yeah, so what we want is a common definition of done in your case. Yeah, and I see that all the time. I walk into company after company where I get asked that question, do you mean the definition of done or the definition of done? Right? So we have to come up with this because we have these levels of done. If we're delivering production quality software at every sprint, it means that done at the end of that sprint needs to equal the quality that's done for the whole product. But what does that mean? What does that mean? So we need to think through that and have a common definition of done, and then just put it up on the wall in our work area, and then we can all hold ourselves and each other accountable to it. And we want our product managers to be part of that conversation. We want every engineer to be part of that conversation. And we want every tester to be part of that conversation. Everyone who's on the team to be part of that conversation.
So can you have this concept of, with the sprint boundaries, you do have this concept of done, but a rollover. But say after 4 sprints, we got to be done. So that you have some flexibility of not being tied by the boundary, but on the overall you say.
So all of the studies I've ever seen about bugs, and I bet you've all seen them too, say that the shortest amount of time that it takes to fix a bug is the shortest amount of time after you created it. And what that means is we want to fix bugs in the same sprint we created them. And we don't want to declare our code. And so what we do in Agile, and I see teams that don't do this, so it will be up here in a minute, which is we time box our sprints, but we don't time box our stories. Stories either meet this definition or they don't, and if they don't, we're not done with them. It doesn't matter whether the sprint's done. We just carry them into the next sprint. We keep working on them until we're done, or we ask our product owner, is that the right thing to do? And we keep having conversations with our product owner whether this stuff's the right thing to do. Yes?
So some part of done is a cultural change for product marketing, because very often they live in the world of good enough for now because they're tied to the sales cycle. And so they can get you to done, but getting them to done is not only a higher staffing level, but it's also a cultural change for them.
It's a cultural change for many of our companies. It's not the product team as much as it is the company. And we need to have that conversation. We need to have the conversation of what is the level of quality that's acceptable here. If we're staffed for a lesser quality level, then let's have that conversation. So Timeboxing stand-ups, a fundamental. So the canonical time box for a stand-up is 15 minutes. It asks 3 questions. Yesterday I said I was going to accomplish something by today. How did I do with that? What am I going to accomplish by tomorrow, by the stand-up tomorrow? And what's standing in my way? Those are the 3 questions. So I come into companies fairly frequently where people say, oh yeah, we're Agile, we do stand-ups. They last for an hour, everybody's sitting down, and what do you mean there are 3 questions? So there's fairly simple. These are practices. Doing practices well counts. Doing retrospectives every iteration. We did this in waterfall. They were called PostMortems. Right? We spend 1.5 years working on a product, and at the end of 1.5 years, we'd ask, how could we do that better? The point of the retrospectives is we do them at the end of every sprint. At the end of every sprint, we ask, how did that go, and could we do that better? And it's the difference between making a New Year's resolution of, I'm gonna lose weight by New Year's next year. Well, how'd that work for you? As opposed to, over the next 2 weeks, I'm going to eat less chocolate. It's very specific, and it's a reasonable amount of time to actually do something and then find out whether it's working or not. And we can try that multiple times, but we can keep learning. We can become a learning organization by asking the question, how can we do this better? What's standing in our way? What keeps us from being a high-performance team?
One of the best practices I saw for keeping stand-up short and focused is don't entertain any discussion about definition or prioritizing. Don't entertain any definition of defining a task or prioritizing it. That all belongs in the Agile task order or whatever. And if it's ambiguous or there's disagreement or it needs to be changed, discussed in a review meeting, but you keep it out of the stand-up.
Right. So this worked for you in your retrospective? In making a better team and making things go better?
So the onus is on the person requesting the change to write the Agile task definition, and if they can't, then you kick it back to them, and the clock doesn't start ticking on that until they have. And if it bubbles up, if there's any confusion about priorities, it bubbles that up.
Yeah. So fundamentally, there are hundreds of ways that we can improve our process. We can improve the requirements process. We can improve the way we work together as developers. We can improve the way that developers and testers work together. We can improve the way that product managers and developers and testers all work together. And we can see that frequently enough that we can keep doing experiments to try things. So one of the things that someone told me a couple of years ago, they were talking about, we can do experiments with process. So they were talking about how they were going to move everybody into one big room. They were going to move everybody out of offices. Everybody had their own office. At least the architect had his own office because he was the one who didn't want to move. And the architect said, well, if I move out of my office, then, it's going to be too noisy. I'm not going to be able to work. I'm not going to be able to get my work done. But he agreed to try it. His manager said, look, I will fight off facilities and keep them from reassigning your office for the next 6 weeks if you try it out here in this and then at the end of 6 weeks we'll ask the question, did this work? Was this better? Did it have an effect? And they got to the end of the 6 weeks, and the manager came up to the architect and said, you know, how was that? And the architect said, it's awful. I can't get any work done. It's too noisy out here, and don't you dare move me back into that office, because all of that noisiness are people telling me things that they're trying to do that are breaking our architecture, and I'd never know about them if I were in my office. I'm not getting my work done, but boy, I'm finding out about the work everybody else is doing, and it's problematic, and that's my job, and I need to be out here. Great experiment. It was a really interesting experiment because it didn't have the outcome that either one of them expected. But it had an outcome that said there's real value to this. And that's what we're looking for, is how do we get value, and can we try something long enough to find out whether it's got value or not? We want to be learning organizations. We want to do rapid relative sizing. So this is something called the Steve Bachman technique for sizing an entire year's worth, 6 months, year's worth of requirements in 3 hours. I did this with a team that I was interim VP of engineering of a few weeks ago, and the product owner came out of that meeting and said, I didn't know estimating could be fun. Well, it's fun because it's only 3 hours in part, and it's also fun because the whole team knows what the whole project is inside of 3 hours. And we need to keep in mind that estimating is not a function of rapid relative sizing, because we're getting these point things, but it's a combination, it's a function of size and velocity and stable teams. We need stable teams in order to have velocity. Velocity tells us how many points we burn in a sprint, and the number of points we burn in a sprint tells us how far we can get in a period of time, or how long it will take to do all of them. And sizing and estimating are not the same thing as committing. And we have to convince our management of that. Many of whom were engineers and seem to have forgotten that. All of the things that they knew when they were engineers, which is sizing and estimating is not the same as committing. And we need to turn out shippable software every iteration, software that meets our definition of done. So those are some of the practices in doing Agile. So how about being Agile? So fundamentally, being Agile, it's about, what I look for is it's about the values and the principles. It's not about the practices. So all of those practices all count, but we all know that voting machines don't make us a democracy. We can go to class every day and not end up being educated. We can go to church every Sunday and not end up being saints. It's the values and the principles that make us saints or educated or democracy. It's not the practices. And we've got, and we can do all the practices of Agile and not be Agile. Half done is not done. So this was the question. We're at the end of the sprint. The story's not done. Let's declare it done because we're at the end of the sprint. No, we time box sprints. We don't time box stories. Half done is not done. We're not done until we meet our definition of done. Until all of us agree we're done. Until all of us agree what we decided up front is done. Our stand-ups, I said our stand-ups are about 3 questions. Our stand-ups really aren't about 3 questions. They're just a practice for getting us to what they are about, which is how are we doing against our plan? We've got a 2-week sprint. We set a plan for that 2 weeks. How are we doing against that? That's the conversation. It's not one-off conversations with the Scrum Master that look like a modern version of what the project manager used to ask us, are you done yet? It's a conversation among the team saying, how are we doing against our plan, and what do I need, and what help do I need, and how could we work together to meet our plan, or do we need to notify our product owner that we're not going to make it? Question back here.
But I think there's a huge difference because it's how are you doing against the sprint plan, not the project plan. So
the sprint plan.
Yeah.
We're talking about the sprint plan. Sorry.
But you get, you know, when you inject marketing people into meetings, you get like, are we on schedule, yada, yada, yada.
Right, no marketing people. There's only a product owner in this meeting.
It sometimes happens. In small companies, you get the sales guy in the meeting as well. And
Not on your life. Not in my meeting, you don't.
it depends, you know. But, you know, you have to push back and say, there is no project plan. There's only your communication with the customer and this sprint.
Yes. Excellent, yes.
This is what you're getting.
Good response.
Nothing else exists. Any expectations, anything sold, anything promised is your business with them. This is what we're giving you.
Right, and the stand-up is about our sprint plan, so I need to update that. The stand-up's about our sprint plan. How are we doing against our sprint plan? That's fundamental.
So one asset pattern is they come back 2 weeks later and said, you know, the customer said this wasn't delivered in the sprint. And you go, it was never in the sprint plan. And they go, oh, but I thought you said you were going to do it, or we said 4 months ago we were going to do it. And you have to hold them to the fire that, like, if it isn't in the sprint plan, it didn't happen.
That's right.
The sprint plan is the only thing that exists.
That's right, and if we put their sprint plan up on the wall, or we put it in Jira, or we put it in Rally, anybody can look at it, and they can look at it every day, they can look at it every hour, they can look at it every minute, and determine whether that story is in there or not, and if they didn't put it in there, it's not in there.
Yeah, and then as you know, sort of something else I learned is something else with the anti-pattern is they go, oh, I can't read Jira, I'm on the road, whatever. So you have to give them read-only access to Jira. Do not give them
Yes.
do not give them edit access. Do not let them prioritize that. But do allow them to do that, or Salesforce, or Jira, or Quixilla, or whatever.
Or put a card wall on the wall and give them a cam feed.
Yeah, give them read-only access to the dashboard.
Yeah.
They can't claim they didn't know about it, but that they can't mess with it.
Great.
I have a different comment on that discussion. I think that it's not true though, because Sprint is a very short development, only like a couple of weeks. But for the sales or the customer-facing people, they need a longer-term plan, like 3 or 6 months when they communicate to customer. They have to have a longer plan and a longer commitment. They cannot live like sprint by sprint.
Yes, and there are ways for them to do that, and there's a whole sprint, what we're looking at is anti-patterns here. That would be an anti-pattern not to do that, because we can do that, and we can do that in Scrum as well. We can do that in Scrum better than we can do it in Waterfall. Show me a Waterfall plan anybody met.
No, I don't mean you go to a waterfall. What I mean is you need a sprint plan, and you also need a longer term.
You need a project plan.
Scope plan, yes.
Yeah, sure.
So we found that, yes, you have to have a project plan, and you want to make sure that everybody on the team, product management, company management, everybody knows your plan. We're pushy in what I do, and we force the elevation of risks to the upper management levels, and even in the middle of a sprint, because it's every day we're finding out, okay, what are the prospects for the end of this sprint, for this story, for this feature, or whatever. And when it turns out that, hey, the risk is now risen or fallen, whatever, it's different than it was last time management checked in, we go talk to management and we write it down and force management all the way up as high as necessary to say what they want to do. Because it's not our power to decide what the project plan is going to be, but it is our responsibility to force them to make a decision.
Yeah.
We tell them the truth, here's this risk, this feature we said was going to be done, there's like a 40% chance now. Do you product and company management want to accept that risk? That's fine. You can go tell your customer, yes, it's going to be done, even though there's only a 40%. That's their job, as long as they explicitly, and I mean in writing. Email is fine, or Jira is fine. It's got to be in writing that they agree to that. And if they disagree with that risk, it's not acceptable for them to say, well, change the risk. No, you decide what you want to do. We can change the schedule. Now the team decides, what can we do? They want the risk to be lower. Fine. Here's our proposal for how to lower the risk on that. And guess what? It's not going to be free. They're going to have to give us more people, more time, more money, or get rid of some features, push some features out. It's their responsibility. Too many developers and QA people too just roll over. And developers are trying to be heroes. Oh no, we'll probably get this done. No, my job is to say, no, I saw your face when you said you could get that done. You don't believe you can get that done. None of us do. But we will take this and go yell at management for you.
All right, all of you should be trying to hire Tom onto your teams as your product owner. All right, so I'm going to move along. Because being empowered and being self-organizing is critical to being agile. Agile is, for every member on the team, no longer about taking orders. It's about stepping up and being part of the figuring out the how, and sometimes figuring out the what.
So our anti-pattern over here is that correct? You need to tell me. So we had a Scrum Master, basically the development manager picked up the role of the Scrum Master. And these stand-ups in the first week were pretty well defined, 15-minute entry. Later on it became hero story. So everyone started to say what I did yesterday and how long it took me to get it today. And so the 15 minutes started getting bigger in half an hour, 35 minutes and so on. And now the manager is saying, I'm trying to get all these guys communicating together and building the team spirit. And my take was, let's decide, either I come in the beginning of the thing and then do my stuff and go away, or at the end of it, you just call me. I don't want to sit through.
Yeah, so managers need to have staff meetings. Scrum Masters need to hold teams to 15-minute stand-ups.
If there was a Scrum Master who was not a development manager, these guys would have just given the stuff and went away. They started making this as a daily management meeting, and it gets very painful to shout up and
I see over and over again stand-ups that are not stand-ups. They've got the word, they've got the title, but they're not stand-ups. They're daily meetings. They're not daily stand-ups. We need to have daily stand-ups.
Power to tell them, hey, not just the person running the meeting, everybody needs to say, hey, you know, we've already 10 minutes into this does not belong.
We've got 5 minutes left.
Yes, everybody should say that.
Yeah, and the Scrum Master's job should be to say, that's not for this meeting. That isn't important, that may or may not be, but if it is an important meeting, to set up an important meeting sometime else, because it doesn't involve everybody on the team. It never involves everybody on the team unless it's the manager's meeting. Back there.
Yeah, so anytime you get any performance stuff, any reviews, any politicking, any one-on-ones, anything, you know, creeping into the stand-up meeting, talking the stand-up meeting. So, you know, you've got to set up some other meeting and, you know,
Yes.
exercise it from the stand-up. The moment that crap gets into the stand-up.
And we identify who should be in that meeting, and we set up that meeting, and those 3 people go have that meeting, but not the whole team. That's an expensive meeting. 15 minutes. Time box it.
It's not a performance review meeting, and if there's some organizational vacuum where people don't know or insecure aren't being communicated about how they're doing, it must be addressed, not on the stand-up.
So just having retrospectives is really not, having retrospectives is the practice. Being a learning organization is the being agile. Delivering the highest customer value every single sprint. Critical role between product managers and product owners and the team. Critical for the team to know that that's what they're doing, and building trust and respect with each other. Just really critical. So other than that, it's easy to do Agile, other than those 2 slides, and some of the points that some of you brought up that aren't on those 2 slides. So one of the other things that I look at is focus. So what does it take to do really great software development? Saying no, yes. So how many things do you have to hold in your head to write the next line of code? Those of you who are software developers. Too many. Too many. How many? A lot, right? How long does it take to assemble all those things?
A while.
A while. So half an hour? Sometimes 40 minutes, sometimes 20 minutes. But somewhere in that range, I'll bet, for most of you. So, how many of you hired into the company you're currently working for, those of you who are software developers, because you wanted to write bugs? Right? We don't do that, right? We hire in to write lines of code. And so we don't try to write bugs. So how do bugs happen? We assemble all those pieces of information in our head and we're missing one, right? So if it takes us a half an hour to assemble all of the pieces to not write a bug, If it takes us half an hour to do that and we get interrupted 29 minutes in, what happens? Ground zero. Flush, yeah. Ground zero. And so if it takes us half an hour to build up all the things to write a line of code and we get interrupted every 29 minutes, how many lines of code do we write in a day? No good ones, yes. 0 good ones or a bunch of buggy ones, frankly. So focus is incredibly important. Focus at the micro level, so I sorted at the bottom, and focus at the macro level. And so one of the first rules of thumb I learned when I was at Apple from Sheila Brady, who was just outstanding in sharing this with me when I feel like I was a kid at the time. She said, when everything is a priority, nothing is a priority. We have to have priorities. We have to have our backlog ordered by priority. It's just critical. So here's a really interesting chart, and this was done by, Mike Cohn published it in his book, but it was done by Stephen Wheelwright and Kim Clark, and the date down here, which I'm sure you can't read from there, is 1993, so I'm going to come back to that. So this is how productive the average person is, and this is information work. So their paper was revolutionizing product development. So it's products, but not necessarily software. So productivity versus number of projects. So productivity actually goes up when we have 2 projects. Why do you think they got that conclusion?
So you might be blocked on one.
You might be blocked on one. Yeah, that's a conclusion I come to. What else? Any others?
It forces you to be more effective and focus on each one because you don't have unlimited time.
Yeah, it does. It does. Multitasking does force us to be more focused. In fact, there was a study at Stanford that showed that on multitasking specifically, that showed that people who were forced to multitask were more productive. It's just that the quality of what they were more productive at went down. And I'll show you that in a minute. But I said and so the third thing, and you can see this happening here on the amount of work. The amount of work falls dramatically on the third thing and the fourth thing and the fifth thing. Now I wanted to come back to 1993. What's happened in our work lives since 1993? The internet, smartphones, mobile. What? Social media. Instant messaging. Yeah, all that stuff has happened. So Mike Cohn, in his book, suggests, maybe this one's already taken. We've got to fall back when life is busy. We've got to fall back. This is our first project that our customer gives us, that our company gives us, that our product manager gives us, that our work lives give us. We've got this fallback. If we take just this part of the graph and shift it left, that's what it looks like. This is our first project, and that's our second and our third and our fourth. It falls off dramatically.
Is it because it's just a bigger project?
I think it's because of the context switching. We switch from how many things do we have to put into our head to now we've got to put a different set of things in our head, and then we switch back and forth and we try to build that set of stuff in our head again. I mean, none of us sign up to write bugs. None of us hired into our companies to write bugs.
Yeah, you're not as focused.
We're not as focused. We're shifting back and forth between things, and so the number of things we shift back and forth causes that context switch and causes defects.
So are there any studies which talk about the impact to the customer of defect density? So it's one thing to say I got 7 bugs, but it's something else to say, and the customer hates our guts. And that translation between defect density and customer reaction is often where a lot of hand waving happens.
Well, I don't know about you, but I personally am really annoyed at Apple Mail, actually, for the number of defects in Apple Mail. I personally, when I run across bugs and defects, it pisses me off. So I don't know about you, but so I haven't seen the studies, but I can't imagine it's anything else. So, but the bottom line about focus is I thought this was great. Chet Hendrickson was on one of the first Scrum projects, said it's not that we don't have enough time, it's we have too much to do.
Well, I would think that one industry where defects would really matter is healthcare.
You think so? Yeah. Yeah, life-critical products.
Right.
Well, we're back to management again. It's just that salespeople very often don't care about quality because they sell this.
They're at the front end.
They will purposely change horizontally to a different customer, a different part of the company, change companies, they don't care. So they're not left with a legacy because it takes a while before the quality comes back to bite the company. So, but again, if company management wants a certain low level of quality, that's their call. The trick is getting them to make that connection between customer satisfaction and the defects.
We should be conscious. We should be conscious and explicit about making those kinds of decisions and trade-offs.
If you think they suck, then go get a different job somewhere because that management sucks. But the problem is we end up getting blamed because they fail to make their explicit decisions.
Yes. There was a question back in the back.
I just wanted to make a comment on you can have very complex requirements that introduce unwanted defects. So I've worked on several products in the embedded area, and communications or just controls, and the requirements change because it's a newer product or it's a different device, things like that.
Yes. Yeah, and you know, part of the reason we use part of the reason that I feel good about agile development is that it allows requirements to change. But they only do it on boundaries, and I can focus during my sprints. I can go heads down during my sprints. So, smart project planning sort of echoes or follows along with that agile with some of those agile bullets. Regardless of whether we're doing agile or not, though, we want to show demonstrable progress frequently. We want to get the risky stuff done first. In fact, somebody brought up risk earlier. We want to get the, good project management is always about doing the risky stuff first, risk-first development. And to the point that you were making, UI should always be high on the risk list. That the part that the customer sees. Anybody ever had a customer who said, I know that that's what I said, but that's not what I meant? This happens, and it's because once they see it, they realize that's not what they wanted. We want to deliver the highest customer value first. Why do we want to do that? What if we run out of money? We run out of time. We always know that we've got the highest customer value done first. Minimum viable product, minimum marketable features, which actually came up before minimum viable product in a book called Software by Numbers for product managers about 12 years ago. And I had a project where I was director of engineering, and it was being done on 3 continents. It was being done we were doing the foundational stuff, but there were 3 project teams that were all working together to do this product, and we were all looking at each other waiting. And I thought, well, this could go for a really long time. And the way out of that was for our team to always be the first and be ready to integrate, to always be the first one ready, because it forces everybody else to be on the same path you're on by being early. And then avoiding over-engineering. Why might we want to avoid over-engineering? Time, money, yeah. What's that? It's not flexible. We need flexible engineering so that we can, because requirements change all the time. So I often ask developers this: how many of you have gotten 400 pages of requirements, and what percentage of those requirements did you deliver? But the other part of that is, what did you deliver that weren't in the 400 pages of requirements? We need to be able to absorb changing requirements. We need architecture and engineering that's good enough that we can refactor regardless of that. and we'll refactor for a whole set of, some subset of what we were asked to do originally, but a whole bunch that we weren't asked to do originally. So paying down technical debt, this is one that I run across all the time, is applications that are just filled. What's technical debt? Anybody here not know what technical debt is? We need to talk about what technical debt is. All right, we've got a few hands. So technical debt was coined by Ward Cunningham, who's the guy who created the wiki, and he created a bunch of stuff around object-oriented programming, and he's one of the true geniuses in our craft of programming. And Ward Cunningham created this notion of technical debt because he recognized that there are times when, to get to the finish line, to ship a product, we actually need to break our definition of done, or we need to break our process, or we need to jump ahead to do some shortcut so we can get the thing out the door. There's nothing wrong with debt. We take on debt all the time to buy houses and to buy cars and to buy some other things. What's wrong is if we don't pay our debt off. We need to pay off our loans. And the same thing is true in software development. And the analogy, the metaphor, is really a good one. We can take on debt, but what happens if we don't pay off our technical debt? What happens if we take shortcut after shortcut after shortcut and then never go back and refactor those areas?
Well, that's why we had releases versions. You
know.
Keep having versions of upgrades.
We keep having versions and upgrades.
That's right, so that, you know, the business.
All right, but a lot of the versions and upgrades I see are just features, though. They're not actually paying down technical debt. What happens if we don't pay down technical debt?
You get interest on it.
You get interest on it, and you go bankrupt, actually. And how do you go bankrupt in software development?
Software gets fragile and you can't fix it.
Software gets fragile, it gets brittle. You can't add a feature to it without breaking it across the board. The cost of any individual feature to add to that software is so high that you have gone bankrupt with your application, and everybody talks about we need to replace the application instead of adding another feature to it. And the cost of, and by the way, the cost of replacing the application is always, in my experience, about 4 to 6 times the most conservative, the longest that anybody comes up with for how long that's going to take, multiply it by 4 to 6 times to replace a whole application. That's my experience. So we need to pay down technical debt, and there are solutions, but it's critical that we do that.
You have to change your budget.
You have to
go, to use the analogy. So you didn't expect to have this debt. You can't stick with your original budget, by which I mean time, people, money, features, schedule, and pay down the debt, because that would be magic.
Yes.
So instead, you have to change your damn budget, which means you got to go back to high-level management and say, hey, stuff happens, and here's where we are. We have to change the budget.
Yes, there are also some tricky ways, though, that we can do it as developers, as managers, as scrum masters, as product owners. So one of the ways in Agile that it happens is that developers, when a team is really humming, can be developing so fast that the product owners can't keep up with them. The one product owner can't keep up detailing and doing acceptance tests and making sure that, and being ready to ship and putting it together and understanding it and doing all the things that the product owner has to do, can't keep up with the development team, and the product owner will call a timeout. I need a sprint in order to catch up with you guys. And the flip side of that is the development team going off and paying down technical debt for a sprint. And it's a nice parallel effort. We used to do this, same problem when we were shipping in Waterfall. We used to do this, we'd get to the end, we'd hand it to our product managers, we, engineering managers, would think, wow, product managers, tell us I got a team that's chomping at the bit, they just finished something, they're ready to leap into something new, and the product managers are saying, we're incredibly busy, we're trying to ship this thing. And we'd have a leeway of 3 to 4 weeks there that we could just apply to paying down technical debt. And there's not much that engineers love more than killing technical debt, paying off loans that they know are there, pulling down brittleness. The result, if we don't do that, is we end up with the Winchester mystery house of software. Back there.
Having said that, there's nothing that non-engineers sort of love patronizing engineers about more than, you have to sell them a case. Don't never say to them, I just need to refactor this, or I need to make it better, or even unit test, or you have to sell out the new features. So there's this one guy, he taught me this trick, he said, never even attempt to sell a case of improving technical debt. Wait until they're mentally bundled with some new feature they plan to implement, wait until they decide they need it, and then say, oh, and by the way, while I'm doing it, I need to refactor this part.
Yes. Another great example. We refactor technical debt as we add a feature that attaches to where the technical debt is, because the code's too brittle to add it onto without refactoring the technical debt.
With some of the really successful companies, it grows too fast, so that there are always enough or too much requests from the customer. Or you build something and it grows so fast so that the scale, by the time you ship it, in a couple of months it goes obsolete. So you just, in those cases, the CEO will come in and basically keep piling things up.
Yeah.
You don't have time to pay the technical debt.
Yeah, occasionally there are times when we finish a product, we're done with it, we never keep working on it. In my experience, though, there's an equal number of times where we develop prototypes that everyone promised we would never ship that are now in production and are just laced with technical debt. And so there are corner cases in both of those, and there are some cases where we're actually not going back into that software with technical debt and working on it, but I tend to see more of these.
What about for legacy products where you don't even know where the technical debt lies? Is it,
well,
analysis or something else?
That's often a too late case. Well, no, it's actually not. It's to the point back here. We're going to work on it. We're going to work on it one piece at a time. If we're going to try to keep that legacy software going, we've already got the Winchester mystery house of software. Now we want to add a feature onto it. Where we're going to attach that feature, we're going to attach it to a very brittle place, to a very fragile spot, and we need to solidify that spot and do the work underneath to brace it up. And we'll slowly brace up our application. Or we'll replace one spot at a time rather than attempting to replace the whole application, which is just enormously expensive. So we want to optimize process, and Mark Innebaugh, who runs a .NET user group, said just about any process is better than no process. The exception to that, I think, is process for process sake. I bet there's nobody in this room who believes in process for process sake. I think there are some people out there, but they're not in this room. You're all smart enough to come to ACM. And I'm a real fan of just enough process. So when I in my youth heard about just-in-time manufacturing, I thought we could apply this to process. Just enough process is what we ought to call that. Not a bit less, not a bit more. We need to find where that line is. And Agile has been a solution for that for me. And so have baby steps, and I like baby steps a lot. So to your question, we need to make small incremental changes, and that's really what Agile is about, is making small incremental changes, testing them, proving that it still works, and then moving on to the next one. Yes?
So the just enough process that you said, to be able to figure out that this process is just enough, you need to have years of experience, prior experience, where you made those mistakes and you realize where that just enough line has to be drawn. New people cannot figure out what that just enough.
It helps. I think you're right. I think that does help a lot. Yeah. This may be my last slide, or my last point, and that's to improve onboarding. One of the, again, back to the study of product team performance. In 2012, which was the first year of this study and the year before I became a co-author of it, they came up with 5 factors that if we do all 5 of those factors, we've got a 67% chance of being, of correlating with a high-performance team. Causation is always a problem, as most of you know, but it correlates. One of those is onboarding, and it's not about onboarding employees into our companies. Our HR departments actually do a reasonable job of that, telling people about their benefits and their salaries and the company processes and all those kinds of things, but onboarding them onto our teams. So effective team onboarding, well, there's the study, but here's what we did as a follow-up in 2013. We asked about onboarding, and only 4% of organizations, of team members in product teams indicate they have a best practice for onboarding product team members. 4%. I've talked to people who've been really effective at onboarding, and I've talked to people who've been really effectively onboarded, so in that 4%. People who walk in the door and in a day or 2 days are writing code in the application because they've been onboarded so effectively, because they've been brought on, they've pair programmed with some of the senior people on the team, their sandboxes were set up, or we've got a process for getting that sandbox set up effectively. We've got all of those kinds of things, and the difference between that and the other is often a month of productivity. Or loss of productivity. So to come down to the bottom line, so that was my last point, chaos is common, not all of it's bad. It's really a series of challenges and of milestones to improve. Milestones to improve from the standpoint of it's like peeling an onion, it's like finding bottlenecks. You will no sooner find one than you'll find that there's one underneath of it. And you'll have improved your process, you'll have improved your team, you'll be on a team you like being on more than you liked being on it yesterday, and it will be humming better. I have been wishing several times during this evening that I had this quote earlier in the talk. This is one I like a lot. Joe Kleinschmidt was a startup founder in San Francisco, and said, in the beginning, everyone will talk about scope and budget and schedule, but in the end, nobody really cares about any of those things. The only thing they care about is this: people will love your software or they won't. That's the criteria to which we should manage. We know that we have managers, we have executives who care about scope and budget and schedule, but fundamentally, if we don't have people loving the software we create, we're going to be out of business. That's what we have to manage to. Thank you.